Welcome, everybody, back from lunch. I hope you've fortified yourself with coffee and that you're ready for the session that we've got this afternoon on the blue economy entitled Actions Towards Creating an Innovative Framework for the Blue Economy. My name is Charles Goddard. I'm editorial director at Economist Impact, and I've directed our own World Ocean Summit for the last 12, 13 years, the last of which was in Tokyo in March. And we've been very proud to have been a collaborator along with Our Ocean Conference for many years. So we look forward to this session particularly as it's very much in line with what The Economist is particularly interested in. So let me just make a few comments about the session itself. And really what we're trying to do, I think, is to explore how countries, how institutions, how companies are really building the blue economy and what the blue economy means, how this concept of the blue economy is evolving as we, in a sense, operationalize it. And of course, there are many different interpretations of the blue economy, some of them primarily focused on growth, others more focused around sustainability and growth, and still others that are unsure in many ways exactly what the blue economy means to them, and indeed are finding their way step by step forward to try and implement some degree of sustainable development in their countries, as well as improving the health of the ocean. I think the potential for the blue economy to address some of the major challenges that the ocean faces, and those challenges, of course, we've heard a lot about this morning, climate change impacts, biodiversity loss, pollution, and of course the impact of our own activities on the ocean themselves, not just the ocean activities in and of themselves, but also our activities on land, how those activities are potentially addressed and mitigated to some degree by our conception of a sustainable ocean economy and a blue economy. And I think it's particularly important to ask these questions about how the concept of the blue economy is evolving, given what we now understand about the nature of the ocean as a system. And this is something that came out a great deal in the course of our own event in Tokyo recently. And indeed, Secretary Kerry talked a little bit about this morning, and that is the really great challenge that we have, because the ocean is not just any system, but it's probably in our most important ecosystem. And indeed, science increasingly is recognizing just how important the ocean is as a system. And that has significant implications, I think, for the way in which we conduct our activities in the ocean as well as outside of the ocean when those activities impact the ocean in a way. And I hope we can explore some of those questions today. And indeed, if any of you are aware of the new David Attenborough film, we played a preview of it at the World Ocean Summit. It's very interesting to hear him now say that the ocean is the most important system that we now need to understand and correct. And I think and bring back to health, importantly. And I think the other important point that he made, which I believe is essential to this discussion, is the ocean can regenerate itself. Not always in exactly the same way that it was 100, 200, 300 years ago, but it can regenerate itself, and quite quickly. And that in some ways the role of the sustainable ocean economy is really to understand how it can contribute rather than do the opposite to that process. And I think this is, again, another salient and important part of the discussion today. So let me just introduce very quickly our very distinguished panelists here. Next to me is Tor Sigfusson, and Tor is a founder of the Iceland Ocean Cluster, and I think it's been his fascinating, innovative-led approach that has established a number of clusters connecting businesses, entrepreneurs, investors, and indeed, to some degree, governance, ocean industries particularly, across the US, Europe, and Africa. So welcome, Thor. And of course, last but not least, Jonas R. Leonis, who is Under-Secretary for Policy and Planning and International Affairs in the government of the Philippines. And he has been supervising a fascinating project on Manila Bay, which requires a significant degree of rehabilitation and not an easy task. And I'm sure we'll hear a little bit of that in a short while. So a warm welcome to all of our speakers. We are going to now ask each of our speakers to speak for about 4 to 5 minutes on areas that are particularly important to them on this question of the blue economy and its evolution as a concept. And let me just welcome Mr. Sang-Hyuk Kim to talk to us about the global blue economy strategies. Mr. Kim.
Thank you, Charles. Let me just very briefly tell you about GGGI, because GGGI is a relatively young international organization born in 2012. It started with a small group of countries, like-minded countries when we started, but it is now one of the fastest growing international organizations. So we have now 50 member countries. Kenya has joined the GGGI recently, and we will have another one, Luxembourg, next month. And we have been running more than 200 projects, and we helped the mobilization of green finance, about $15 billion. And we have operations in more than 50 countries with about 700 people together. But still, that is not big enough to deal with the enormous climate issues, including the blue economy. Last week, I attended the IMF and World Bank annual spring meeting, and I met with the head of the planet, the vice president of the World Bank in charge of the planet, and he told me the blue economy, among many other things, blue economy is the most undervalued and under-tapped area, but it has one of the greatest potential to be realized. And he said it's like a giant, sleeping giant in the ocean. Then how can we awaken the giant sleeping beneath the ocean? So that would be the question. So do we need to drag him to ashore, to our land, or do we need to go to the water? So, well, we have had a sort of kind of terrestrial mindset, that mindset of kind of depletion, domination, and exploration, and short-term game, something like that. We need to change our mindset completely to realize the great potential of blue economy, which means we need to forge a new partnership with the ocean. Not that kind of depletion, but with the sense and spirit of a renewal, something like that. And GGGI, even GGGI, blue economy is a somewhat new area, but we are doing several things. For example, in Ecuador, GGGI supported the government to seal the world's largest debt for nature swap on record, which amounted $460 million. And that resources were used to create the Galapagos Life Fund, which is going to preserve the Galapagos Marine Reserve. That is one of the most precious ecosystem in the world. And Indonesia, we are restoring mangrove through community-led initiative that generate income for ecosystem services. That is demonstrating how nature-based solution can scale both environmental and economic impact together. And recently we are doing a kind of pilot project on seagrass in Indonesia with the active use of AI and digital technology that includes satellite service. We will see the potential of the so-called blue carbon by doing that. And last year in Mexico, GGI also supported the trust funds for rural development to issue a sustainable fishing and aquaculture bond, so-called blue bond, with a total value of US $220 million. And in partnership with the Korean Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, we are advancing low-carbon maritime transport in Fiji, Tonga, and Vanuatu through the development of national roadmaps and piloting innovative green technologies. And also, we are working with the Busan Metropolitan City and Busan Port Authority to develop a new relations with the so-called Arctic cities. The Arctic Sea lane is now being vitalized, and we need to make sure that should be developed in an eco-friendly way. So we are going to set a kind of firm environmental standard when we navigate the Arctic Sea lane. Then we are going to make a kind of city-level cooperation, starting from Rotterdam, Tromsø, and Busan, something like that. And also, we are working with the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries and other countries to develop the potential of the blue carbon that is going to be aligned with the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. But still, we are doing many things, but we need to do much more than this, looking at the huge potential of blue economy. And for that, we need to deepen the collaboration with the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim, and I find the projects you're engaged in absolutely fascinating. I think you've put your finger on a question that really is at the hub of all of this, and that is, there is this sense that the blue economy is hugely untapped, this sense that it's largely undervalued. How do we awaken this giant, as you mentioned, somebody at the World Bank was talking to you about? But I guess my response to that is, how do we ensure that that awakening is fundamentally about managing the long-term good health of the ocean? And it strikes me that quite often that awakening is not about that, it's about the economy. And in some senses that's particularly important. But let's continue the discussion. Barker, can I just ask you, Barker Mosai, to give your presentation or your thoughts, and then we'll move on from there.
Thank you, Charles. And thank you also for the intervention that came before me. I'm trying to look this way because the light is actually quite blinding. So there's a new, you spoke about the different concepts. There's a new concept that I think is now extremely fundamentally important, and that is the concept of a regenerative blue economy. And the reason for that is every report that we are reading now is showing us that our oceans and the people who depend on them are in the red. There isn't a single patch of ocean that has remained untouched by human activity, and some parts of the ocean are fundamentally altered. So that means that we can no longer abide by the principle of do no harm. We must look at actively regenerating the oceans. The other dimension to that is the social dimension. I'm referring to the latest IPBES report, which has identified, and I'm glad that you use the word dominance, because it identifies historical dominance, inequality, and short-termism as root causes of biodiversity collapse, and also of the inequalities that we now face, and which really squeeze the abilities of communities and countries to invest in regeneration, in essence. So this is something that really needs to be addressed. So the reason why we're talking about a regenerative blue economy is precisely because now we need to dismantle those systems. Last week at the spring meetings, coming from an African perspective, there were worries that we are again going to see a retrocession of some very hard-won gains, and already this comes on the back of questions around how come the African continent has so many businesses. It is, at the end of the day, one of the most entrepreneurial continents, but too little business. This is an Economist article and research, Charles, so you might remember it. There was also fears and questions around how can we afford to look at sectors such as, very science-heavy sectors, if we are in what some might call a persistent state of vulnerability, which is a term that has been attached to many countries in the global south. So now I feel like we need to flip that narrative on its head, which is instead of seeing the blue economy, or rather a regenerative blue economy, as a luxury that we cannot afford, we need to see it as a gateway to transform the economy and bake resilience into various aspects of the economy. And key to that is the involvement of local communities. Coastal communities have the instinct, they have the lived experience of the ocean that perhaps other parts of the world, other communities do not necessarily have. But what we need now is to really invest quite heavily into building nature-positive pipelines that are embedded within these broader transformations, and it is entirely doable. So you may know already that at the moment there's a negative trend. That environmentally harmful subsidies have increased actually by 55% since 2021, which in a way it shows that, okay, we do have the finance that's available. What we need is really to change the direction in which the finance is going. And communities are really the catalyst for those solutions. One of the projects that we're working on at the International Union for Conservation of Nature is called the Great Blue Wall Initiative. And at the heart of this initiative, which is born in the Indian Ocean in Africa and connected across different countries in the Western Indian Ocean, in Eastern and Southern Africa, is really the question of connecting with each other. What the Great Blue Wall Initiative does is basically we're looking at integrated seascapes, which brings together communities as well as policymakers to try to identify pathways, not just for pure conservation, but also for creating livelihoods, for untapping the solutions that all these people have, and essentially taking an all minds on deck approach. So what we've noticed in our interventions, and this is really something that we hope, now that the next Our Ocean has been announced in one of the key countries of the Great Blue Wall Initiative, that is Kenya, we hope to demonstrate that for all of you coming next year, is really that it is a region that's actually primed for investment, that is primed and ready for investment in ocean-positive ventures. And with the Great Blue Wall Initiative, this is precisely what we're trying to achieve. A few weeks ago, we co-organized a Regenerative Ocean Week looking at developing a science-to-business framework, which looks at creating a continuum between ideation to commercialization. And through this framework, we are basically encouraging those ideas to come to fruition. And we're looking at ideas that range from tackling plastic pollution to livelihoods based on mangrove ecosystems. And just to conclude on what is also part of this integration of the seascape, we are trying to foster the enabling environment that would allow those pipelines to thrive. So part of that is really digging our heels in to enhance science, to enhance the output and connection across the region, And a clear link to that is with the High Seas Treaty, the BBNG agreement, where we're focused not just on creating a high-level governance framework, but really the science and enabling conditions around it. So with that, we're really looking at it in a very integrated way and trying to tackle the issue of undercapitalization of the pipelines and of the ocean economy. So that transformation is key. And if we have time, I'll go to the 5 shifts in the next stage of my intervention.
Thank you so much, Barker. And I think we're hearing some very exciting things here. On the one hand, Mr. Kim, you're saying, obviously, we need to forge a new relationship with the ocean. Barker, you're saying, actually, sustainability, perhaps we should be thinking about regenerative economies and resilience building in the ocean, which is different in some ways from the older concept of sustainability. Theodore, can I ask you to tell us a little bit about A, what's been happening post the 9th Our Ocean Conference, but B, how the Greek economy too is dealing with this question of the blue economy?
Thank you very much, Charles, and thank you for your participation in the 9th Our Ocean Conference in Athens. It was very valuable. As much as we discuss about blue economy, or whenever I study about blue economy, just thinking that the ocean has so much to offer to us that the ocean doesn't need us, we need the ocean. And the investment to the ocean is the investment back to us. So Your Excellencies, distinguished fellow panelists, dear ladies and gentlemen, and members of our ocean family, first, let me congratulate you on your commitment to the protection of the ocean, and let me also congratulate our host, the government of Korea, for its leadership in the ocean affairs. A leadership that is manifested here today with the organization of the 10th Our Ocean Conference in Busan. Well, the ocean is estimated to have a monetary value, if we can place a monetary value on the ocean, of about $24 trillion. That makes the ocean to be the 7th largest economy on Earth. Of course, taking into account all the blue economy potential, as our speakers described, and so many untapped potential that exists in the oceans that we're not aware of, especially in the deep sea bed and in other parts of the ocean, the value that the ocean encompasses is worth much larger than this. And Greece is recognizing the importance of the ocean. And this is why we decided to organize the 9th Our Ocean Conference in Greece back in April 2014. And we supported the rest of the states in order to raise commitments for the ocean. And we were very happy to raise more than $11.3 billion in commitments in all the 6 sectors of the Our Ocean Conference. You are all very familiar with this. For example, in the marine protected areas, Greece itself announced 2 new marine national parks that makes us reaching the goal of the 30 by 30. And we have already prepared the plans for the new marine parks, and we soon are going to pass the bill before the parliament for this. And of course, on the sustainable blue economy, which is the theme of our panel today, on the ocean and climate nexus, still we need to work more on this. The people in general, they have not understood the very close connection on ocean and climate, and there is a monetary issue on this, but mainly an issue of existence, maritime security, sustainable fisheries, and marine pollution, and especially Greece wanted to emphasize more on the new sustainable forms of tourism and the green shipping. So we have to acknowledge that Greece is a champion of blue economy, and this is very much in our DNA because the country is very organically linked to the sea. The ties of the Greeks with the sea are very deeply rooted in our history, in our culture, in our society, and of course in our economy. The largest part of the Greek economy is related to blue economy because of our extensive coastline and the countless islands that we have, as well as the rich marine heritage that is dating back to ancient times. And of course, by the fact that more than 20% of the world merchant fleet in terms of tonnage capacity is of Greek ownership. And of course, not to mention the numerous cruise lines, the short sea shipping, the ferry lines, and the fisheries and the aquaculture activities. And if we add to this the coastal tourism, which is, as we say in Greece, the heavy industry of Greece, that really accounts only tourism up to the 20% of the country's GDP and has to offer more than 800,000 jobs in the tourist activities. So you can understand that Greece is a blue economy country. However, the old tradition of blue economy cannot be very relevant today. So Greece needed to change the vision and to create a vision of new, sustainable economy. And this went hand by hand with the new 21 commitments that we announced on the occasion of the OurOceanConference. And the most pertinent commitments out of these that relate to the blue economy had to do with three main sectors: the sustainable fisheries, the green transportation, and sustainable tourism. And I'm going to give you shortly some examples. For example, when we talk about sustainable fishing, Greece is the very first European country that decided to completely ban bottom trawling, especially in their MPAs. And we're going to begin this ban by 2026. And of course, we have already withdrawn licenses for unsustainable ways of fishing, for example, boat seine fishing and other ways. And we really want to curb overfishing in our waters. So we also promote sustainable aquaculture techniques, and we provide for new jobs and other alternative sources of incomes to fishermen that they might lose their income if we stop unsustainable ways of fishing. So we're trying to have a transition, but this transition needs to be just, to include everyone. Regarding the decarbonization of the maritime sector, as most of the countries, we aim of the reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030, of course, and becoming completely carbon neutral by 2050. And to this end, we have already committed to a very concrete fleet replacement plan to reduce the environmental footprint of passenger ships and the commissioning of new low-emission ships. So Greece is emphasizing both on retrofit and on new building, and of course on the alternative fuels. And what is very important is that we have started create infrastructure of cold ironing in 12 of our ports. That's a start. We're going to continue it more than this, because as we used to say, green shipping starts from the ports. So it is important to all of us. Further, regarding tourism, Greece has established a Center for Sustainable Tourism, which aims to provide open, free data to the Mediterranean countries and also promote sustainable sources of tourism activities such as diving and underwater tourism. And in general, we do have a sustainable blue tourism strategy. And the country is, in general, focusing into having energy neutral and waste zero tourism infrastructure. And last but not least, the Prime Minister himself announced a new fund that is more than 1.6 billion euros that aims to decarbonize the islands, which is the main touristic attraction for the country. So Greece is leading by example in these fields. Well, my, however, message is that Greece cannot do it alone. We all have to work together, because there is no green without blue, but there is no blue without our collective action.
Well spoken, Denisia. I think that is a very, very important message that I think this conference actually encapsulates anyway, but I think it's very important to be reminded of that. Let's move straight forward, shall we, to Tor Sigvason, who's going to talk about the seafood industry and innovation in that
Thank you, Charles. Great pleasure to be here. I wanted to emphasize, I have a few slides if you see them in the back there. I wanted to emphasize the fact that our feeling is that we are really in a silo ourselves. We realize that most people don't know what the blue economy is. And so what we did in Iceland, when I founded the Iceland Ocean Cluster, was actually to map all the parties that were actually involved with the Ocean Cluster. We call it the Iceland Ocean Cluster, meaning we found people that had never thought of themselves as being a part of the blue economy, but were a big part of it. Not only the bankers and the investors and the researchers, but also students interested in these topics, etc. But they felt themselves a little bit lost and not a part of the economy. You weren't a fisherman, you weren't from a fisherman's family. So we knew we needed to do what we call connect the dots, figure out a way to get them to talk, because this language is even very different from the academic over to the fisherman. And we started by realizing first that we're all in silos. The fishermen have their own association, the fish processors have their own associations, students are on their own, and academic researchers as well. So we realized that the big thing for us was basically to tear down those silos. But how to do that? We decided that the best way would probably be to figure out a way to find sort of the low-hanging fruits. And one of the low-hanging fruits that we saw in Iceland was basically to look at the fish. You know, the fish is much more than the fish. Fish is basically something that can be, and is of course, some of the most valuable proteins in the world. Still, 50% of most fish species are actually thrown away because they are defined as waste. In Iceland, we are doing quite a lot, but on global scene, we see the fillets maybe, of course, taken out, and maybe the liver, but the rest of the thing is defined still in most countries, sadly so many countries, as waste. But to do so, to change this behavior, we needed to connect people that had quite a different experience and skills than we've seen. That is our blue economy. What happened with the Icelandic fish, and this could be any fish in the world basically, most fish species are super valuable in terms of their protein, for instance, is that we did what we call the 100% fish. There is no waste, there's very little waste in the seafood industry in Iceland. What we did was to hook up with people that had never been thinking about the fishing industry as an option, people coming from the pharmaceutical industry, from the beauty sectors, from fashion even. We do leather for the fashion industry now. We do, of course, the rose. We do all kinds of medical products with the fish skin. And what's interesting, this is now suddenly becoming one of the greatest opportunities for a seafood country. Why? What's interesting is that we can actually make now from one decent cod products that are valued at $5,000 per piece. Not only that, but in few years we will probably have more people working on the waste streams of the fish and creating more value from the waste streams on the fish than basically from the fish fillet. And this is something that we're trying to announce to the nations of all over the world, because it's so sad how the culture is stuck. We are in these silos. We're not breaking out of these silos, which means that we're not able to connect the fisheries with people that are needed to take these steps, because we are not going to see the fishermen themselves becoming pharmacists or beauty producers. There's a need to bring people on board, but to do so we need to break down silos. We have now at least 10 million metric tons of waste around the world, which we should not define as waste. We should define them as super valuable products. And that is our biggest task. And we're actually working on quite many products and many projects all around the world. And I'm glad to see now that the clusters that we've made are now springing all over the world. We've started in the US, we have now 5 clusters in the US, and we have clusters now coming up, even in Korea. We're in talks with Koreans, in Namibia, elsewhere, and all of these are basically silo busters, as we call them. The idea behind clusters is to break down these silos and get people to talk. But my main message is probably the most successful part of our journey has basically been to bring young people into this blue economy. And I was so happy to see the Young Leadership Conference here yesterday and see the young people, the dynamism that's in that group, but we need to bring them in. It is not necessarily their biggest thing. They like game technology, all kinds of IT stuff. They think still that seafood is boring. It is not. Blue economy is not boring. We just need to tell them, open up these doors and break down the silos.
Thank you, Tor, very much. And I think that is such an important message, that last one. But I also think that this question of breaking down silos is one of the reasons that we have not been able to move forward as quickly as possible. And indeed, I would argue, and I think I was mentioning this to you before, is that we have many conferences on the ocean. We go to all of them. We had one ourselves. There's one coming up, UNOC, and good Lord, we go to plenty of these conferences. And one of the challenges that all of us face is trying to get all of the people that need to be in the room and don't recognize necessarily that they should be in the room, it's sometimes a bit of an echo chamber, and we need to somehow adjust that. But thank you, Tor. Can I come lastly to Jonas and your thoughts and experiences and the progress that you're making in the Philippines? Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, to our co-speakers, distinguished guest colleagues, and partners for the ocean. A pleasant afternoon to you all. As an archipelagic country consisting of 7,600 islands, seated at the apex of the most biodiverse marine regions in the world, which is the Coral Triangle, harnessing the Philippines' blue economy must also put a premium on the conservation of our rich marine habitats, ecosystems, and biodiversity, our wealth and natural heritage upon which we depend. As a nation that strongly abides by international law and a rules-based order, the Philippines is implementing ambitious enhancement to its national capacities for science, for the management of ocean environments, from ridge to reef to shelf and areas beyond our national jurisdiction, in order to support our commitments to multilateral environmental agreements and the sustainable development goals on climate, biodiversity, and ocean. One of our first national enhancements is on ecosystem and natural capital accounts. While we have estimates of the economic value of our ecosystem and natural resources, the Philippines recently enacted Republic Act number 11995, which seeks to develop and establish our country's ecosystem and natural capital accounts towards improving the role of a data-driven, up-to-date ecosystem valuation system in informing policy and decision-making for economic activities. In support of this landmark legislation, our department, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, is also establishing marine scientific research stations, which is strategically located in distinct biogeographic regions all over the country, which we are expecting to generate scientific data and knowledge for the management of our ocean environments, as well as to inform the regulatory functions and frameworks of our national and local institutions. Each marine scientific research station is guided by their own research agenda, which takes into consideration the habitats, ecosystems, and biodiversity that they host and the threats that they face. All in all, the Philippines seeks to transform its policy environment for the blue economy towards climate resilient and nature positive development. Our department has just recently created an Ocean Environment Task Force in order to formulate a national ocean environments policy to comprehensively and holistically enhance and address gaps in existing management and governance framework for ocean environments, including those areas beyond our national jurisdiction. Alongside previously mentioned initiatives, we seek to maximize partnership with state and non-state actors alike, from scientists and academia to civil society, private sector, and international development partners in implementing our national plans and programs, such as the Philippine Development Plan, our National Adaptation Plan 2023-2050, and our Philippine Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan 2024-2040. The Philippines is ready to collaborate and engage with partners towards facilitating this innovative framework for the blue economy in a manner consistent with international law and in harmony with nature and people. Thank you, and a pleasant afternoon to all.
Thank you very much, Jonas. And I'm fascinated to hear that the Philippines is taking up natural capital accounting as an important means of making the right kind of policy decisions around the ocean. And I only wish that more countries would look at that framework and think about how they could implement it. Thank you for talking about that. I want to come back, and I realize I've got the unenviable task of trying to get everybody to say something within the next 15 to 20 minutes. And I come back to a couple of things, I think. One is this question of the evolving understanding and nature of the blue economy. And what I'm hearing in the panel, I think, is some really interesting steps forward in the way in which we look at the blue economy and the way in which we understand what the blue economy means. And it wasn't so long ago that the European Commission, amongst others, put out papers about blue growth and about, expanding different industries in the ocean, expanding. And I think what we're hearing now is something quite different. We're hearing a much more nuanced discussion around how to build resilience in the ocean, how to move a little bit further beyond the question of sustainability to the question of a regenerative economy. Can I just ask, how do we feel as a panel, and I was going to be slightly different, but how do we feel that the current definitions of the blue economy are meeting the challenges that we need to address in the ocean? And I'm just going to run. I do want to make sure that we keep to relatively short answers, please, 1 to 2 minutes maximum, because otherwise we won't get a chance to get it all in. But Mr. Kim, can I start with you?
Yeah, so basically I think blue and green economy have some things in common. We are developing green and blue growth index with the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. There are several elements which go together. One is efficient and sustainable use of resource. And we need to value the nature capital protection and the economic opportunities, embracing new technologies and expanding finance, and also social cohesion that needs to be supported by community. Those are the basic common elements between green and blue economy, I think. But what I'd like to mention is that, to my eyes, blue or ocean sectors are still operate in silos, as Dr. Sigurdsson mentioned. And I always ask this question: if the climate change is to one of the largest, biggest challenge to our civilization, do we have strong enough national and global governance to deal with that challenge? The same is true blue economy. So we might need to have a super ministry dealing with blue economy, which can deploy finance and technology, etc. Actually, we don't have it. In many countries have ministries that are dealing with ocean affairs, but they are not strong enough. But looking at the huge challenges and opportunities of blue economy, we need to have stronger governance structure. And we also need global leadership, because this is about a collaborative economy. And we need a person like John Kerry. Last night, when we had a dinner together, he said, I am 80 years old, but I'm mentally, physically, he's 60 years. We might need a kind of global president of blue economy and green growth. And I think we have a very important agreement, Paris Agreement of climate change. And we might need a kind of new covenant agreement for blue economy. For that, we need global leadership and global cooperation.
Thank you, Mr. Kim. I think just let me pick up this question of new, stronger governance and regulation in particular. Kevin Barker, can I come to you? And you've talked a little bit about some of the sort of defining aspects of the new, sustainable, dare I use that word, resilient ocean blue economy. What do you think, about whether or not our present conceptions meet the challenges that the ocean faces? And clearly one of those challenges, how do we put ourselves together in the right way in order to be able to address it from a governance perspective?
Thanks, Charles. I think perhaps maybe an easier way to look at it is not so much the definition itself, but rather the principles that define how we're doing business, right? And earlier I mentioned equity and equality. Those really need to be the North Star of the governance that we are looking at. The second thing is the leadership that you mentioned is so critical. We really need to see that stepping up of leadership at all levels. We've been talking a lot about finance, and I think the leadership that we need, the policy frameworks are part of that leadership. We need to have a signal from governments, from policymakers, that we are creating that enabling environment, that we are ready to take the first step to de-risk those investments into the blue economy. At the end of the day, just to draw a parallel, the space program, it was not initially a private sector-led program. The first step was taken by governments. So I think that is extremely important to recognize that governments have that agency and responsibility to take that first step, even though we know we're going through very difficult times, but we need to understand that these setbacks will keep happening, especially for developing countries. They will keep happening, so we have to display that leadership and think long-term in establishing those sectors of the economy that are knowledge-based and not extractive. And we need to be very careful not to keep falling into the pipe dreams of short-termism, even though sometimes the monetary and the fiscal space that is afforded to countries is so tight that we think there's no way out of it. But this is where the partnerships are so critical. One of those key examples is the pipe dream of deep sea mining, which we really need to be very careful about. That we are basically looking at irreversible long-term damage that will eventually impact communities. So what we need to be investing in rather is building the capabilities for those regenerative sectors, addressing essentially transforming economies for nature and equity, and looking at the regeneration as a competitive advantage. And the last key element of that governance framework is that it has to be science-based, it has to be backed by evidence. And for that, we need to be investing in science, in locally embedded science. And the final point I would make is, in addition to that, all those decisions have to be co-created. We need to be putting in place mechanisms for local communities, for essentially even dissenting voices to be part of creating localized solutions that have scalable potential across region, and also conducting regionalized research, regionalized solutions, pooling of those solutions. And finally, before I hand over to Dion, and this is not just like a woo-woo thing to say, but more than ever, perhaps the most fundamental thing that we need to do now is repair and revisit our relationship with nature. Repair that human-nature, human-ocean relationship, because we have been, in a way, stripped of our agency of connecting with the ocean. And for that, we need to look to islanders, we need to look towards the Pacific, we need to look at the coastal communities, we need to look at what you said earlier as well, the people who live by the sea, who have this rich history by the sea, including people who've traveled, perhaps, as a result of enslavement, they have the ocean in their DNA, in their blood, in their memory. So we really need to restore that relationship and take it as a torch that will guide us towards a more effective way of investing, a more effective way of being.
Thank you, Parker. I think that's come out in several of the comments that have been made, is the sense that somehow not only do we need to revisit our relationship with nature, but of course, given the context that we have here, our relationship with the ocean, and indeed possibly rethink our concept of the ocean. It's not just salt water, but it's also fresh water too, and think about how we can join those two things together in a more intelligent way. Denisia, can I come to you? Because I think that this, again raises, questions about to what extent should the market be governing what we do in our economic activities, and to what extent should the governance and the government and indeed policy making and regulation frame more clearly how the market needs to act in the context of the ocean, including how it needs to address questions such as nature and the ocean?
Well, Charles, to this question, let me add a third factor, science. So in the case of the ocean governance, as it is in the case with all the environmental governance, we need to have science and scientific data and all the knowledge to set the primary rules, which are the nature rules, and then to have the governments interpret these rules and also interpret the needs of society and create the overarching frameworks like the international, the regional, the national frameworks. Under these frameworks, then we need all the segments of society, primarily the private sector, because they have the means to implement the policies and also to create new economies, and also, of course, the civil society and everyone else that could be in the equilibrium. And we need to have them both, because you cannot really have, for example, new technologies, emerging technologies that are very relevant to the sustainable blue economy without the industry. You need the academia and the industry to have. So, for example, now we are working in Greece to create a new cluster of innovation and new technologies, including AI and bioeconomy, etc., for the oceans. As very well you did for the ocean cluster in Iceland, it is very important to have the business, the clusters, and of course to have new technological innovation in what we mentioned before, like the green shipping. We need the industry to create new alternative marine fuels. We cannot do without it. So we need all the sectors to go through a big transformation, taking into account the ocean needs, which are human needs. Because as I said at the beginning, it is more that humanity needs the ocean and not the vice versa. So we need to have a healthy ocean in order us and our economy to be healthy, all of us together.
Thank you, Denisia, and I think, I don't think anybody here is going to disagree with that. I guess the challenge for us all will be, how do we stop thinking just of our own needs and think of actually what nature needs too? Really, really important question, because without nature we are, well, we're nothing. Tor, can I just come to you with a slightly different question, because I know this question of governance and of joining things up has been quite closely looked at in Iceland. What do you feel are the kind of most important innovations that we need to bring forward now to address how we move towards a more resilient ocean economy or more sustainable ocean economy? What would you suggest are the kind of key elements of that steps, those set of steps that need to be taken?
What a challenging question. But I must answer with a kind of different one, because I think what the biggest innovation that we need to look at is basically how to inspire industries to take role in this much larger role than they've had so far. And to do so, well, I must tell you, when I started the Iceland Ocean Cluster some 15 years ago, we were always, we met with lots of seafood CEOs and tech companies, and they all started to tell me, like, you seem to be talking about something that government should do. And that is sort of the case. It's like we have kind of like we always said government, especially in my part of the world, government is doing so many things that businesses are really just waiting for whatever they do. We need to inspire them to do more themselves. So what I asked at these meetings was basically, what could you do by collaborating? And what is so amazing for all of us is to see now in these 10, 15 years is that instead of, as I was always trying to do, is to inspire the CEO to get it to trickle down the sustainability mentality and the culture, now it's vice versa really. In the cantinas, the young people, the new people on board, they're all talking about sustainability in the blue economy. So I am very faithful that things are going to move quite fast, but we need to bring the industry much more into the picture and get them to understand that this is good business as well. And we have to realize that they need to see that the blue economy, sustainability, the eco issue is a good business. We know it is good for the environment, but we need to show them also it's a good business. If we don't, we will have them a little bit on the sideline. So innovation coming from relationship networks, building them, is the most important part that we can work on, I think, in the coming years.
Thank you, Jonas. I just wonder if you can pick that up, because I think this question of how governments both support and provide the frameworks, the facilitating frameworks for more sustainable businesses in the ocean, as well as how businesses themselves interpret the idea of being sustainable, is something deeply important. Are you seeing the government in the Philippines being able to sort of transmit that message? And are you hearing back from businesses in the Philippines that that's the direction that they feel the government should help them move towards?
Thank you, Charles, for that question. Perhaps the direction of the department is just to guide our businesses on how they can implement blue economy initiatives. As mentioned by the previous speakers, there are critical elements that we need to observe to make sure that sustainable blue economy would exist. No? We have identified first three elements that are critical that our businesses should observe. Number one, sustainable blue economy must recognize that it is heavily reliant on the long-term sustainability of the biodiversity and natural resources. So they're not focusing on just exploration, but of course, more on biodiversity conservation, natural resource protection. And that such protection, conservation, and sustainable use for natural resources should be considered an integral part or component of the blue economy, not a distinct one, not a separate one. The second key element that we need to make sure that there should be a sustainable blue economy, as mentioned by Secretary Kerry this morning, is the application of science from the data collection, knowledge management, to innovation towards improving systems and frameworks that is aligned with the conference theme of digitizing the ocean. And last and finally, perhaps it was also mentioned by the other speaker, is that the inclusivity and equitable access to resources. Sustainably harnessing the blue economy must involve all sectors and levels of society. It should be a whole government and whole society approach, particularly the local communities and the indigenous peoples. So with this as guides for our business, I think with this framework, we can ensure that blue economy can thrive in the Philippines. Thank you, Tor.
Thank you, Jonas. And I'm so sad to say that we really do have to wrap up so that we can now move to the commitment presentations. But I just want to thank all of our speakers for incredibly thoughtful comments. And I'd like to say that what I take away from this is that we are, in fact, creating a much more solid understanding of what it means to have human activities that have an impact on the ocean. It's taking too long to implement many of those things, and there isn't enough joined-upness, A, in government, and B, in industry, and B and C between government and industry. And business, should I say. But we are beginning to understand that it isn't just about sustainability anymore and about the sustainability of a business. It's about whether or not overall, Earth systems are, and the ocean in particular, is being recognized for its critical importance to us and the way in which we choose as economic actors to increase its resilience and increase its health. And that is, in many ways, an opportunity for us, as much as it is, in some ways, a profound challenge. I'm sorry, I do have to move straight now into the commitment presentations, but I do want to just ask you to give a hand to our fabulous speakers. Sorry, I need a coffee. I'm not sure if those comments resonated, but at some point we will get one. Let me now proceed with the commitment presentations. And I want to call one by one the various parties that are going to make their commitments up to the stage. And let me do so by, first of all, calling the Republic of Indonesia, Kartika Listriana, who's the Director General of Marine Spatial Management, up to the stage to make your commitment, please. My glasses on? There we go. Oh, there we go.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Indonesia, as an archipelago with the 6th largest exclusive economic zone in the world, sees that the ocean economy is substantial for its growth. We view the blue economy as one of the key indicators for creating a sustainable ocean for the greatest benefit to the prosperity of the people, while also playing a supporting role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Hence, Indonesia is strongly committed to revitalizing the health of the ocean and accelerating sustainable economic growth through the 5 main strategies with the blue economic approach, which are, first, expansion of marine protected areas to 30% by 2045 to preserve biodiversity. Second, quota-based fishing policy to ensure the sustainability of fisheries resources. Third, development of sustainable aquaculture to ensure food and livelihood security. Fourth, strengthening surveillance and control on coastal and small island areas. And fifth, marine debris cleanup program involving fishers and coastal communities. Therefore, marine spatial planning, MSP, is a critical tool for achieving a sustainable blue economy. By carefully planning and managing human activities, including industry, in the marine environment, we can ensure that the ocean continues to provide valuable resources and ecosystem services for generations to come. Hence, in 2025, Indonesia commits to complete the zoning plan document, conduct a review of the zoning plan document, and legalize regulation related to the zoning plan, interregional MSP, national strategic areas MSP, particular national strategic areas MSP. Indonesia will also continue to play an active role in the International Marine Spatial Planning Forum, global and regional organization, through regularly deposit in the status of its marine spatial planning at the IOC UNESCO Global MSP and actively contributing to the MSP Global Roadmap. Lastly, as part of our commitment to preserve the global ocean through the blue economy, we plan to host the Ocean Impact Summit in November this year, 2025. We are delighted to extend the invitation to esteemed delegates, ministers, and heads of government to join this important event in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Republic of Indonesia, to Kartika Listriana in particular, who is Director General of Marine Spatial Management. I'd like to call next, please, the Department of International Cooperation from the Ministry of Natural Resources of the People's Republic of China, Dr. Li Li, who is the Division Director of the First Institute of Oceanography.
Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Chinese government, I'm pleased to announce the following commitment, reflecting our dedication to international cooperation and sustainable development in marine and environmental fields. Firstly, China is committed to furthering the development of the South China Sea Tsunami Advisory Center, building on the existing intergovernmental coordination mechanism under the UNESCO IOC South China Sea Tsunami Warning and Disaster Mitigation System. We will continue to support the center's international operations. Our efforts will focus on enhancing its service functions in tsunami warning and disaster mitigation, strengthening regional capabilities in earthquake and tsunami monitoring, early warning systems, and technological research. These initiatives aim to minimize the impact of tsunami disasters on coastal communities and economic development across the region. Secondly, China is ready to leverage cooperative platforms such as the Chinese Regional Hub under the Global Ocean Decade Program for Blue Carbon and the Westpac Working Group on Blue Carbon Ecosystem Restoration. Through pilot projects in ecosystem restoration and public education campaigns, we will foster nature conservation awareness. Additionally, we will strengthen collaboration between management authorities and non-governmental organizations, support evidence-based policymaking, and mobilize private sector's investment. These actions will enhance regional cooperation in conserving and restoring coastal wetlands in the Western Pacific, while advancing the science and practice of ecological restoration technologies. Thirdly, China pledges to contribute more significantly to global ocean observation and forecasting initiatives. In collaboration with the international community, we will utilize cutting-edge technologies, including our self-developed GNSS drifting buoys, to drive the upgrade of the global ocean observation system to GOOS 2.0. Moreover, China has achieved scientific outcome in turbulence theory, addressing the long-standing challenge of inaccurate typhoon intensity forecasting. We are eager to share high-quality marine and climate disaster prevention products with the world, contributing to global efforts in disaster mitigation. Together, let's work toward building a safer, more resilient, and prosperous ocean for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Li, for the commitment from the Minister of Natural Resources of the People's Republic of China. Next, I'd like to invite the government of Ecuador, Jorge Enrique Blasio Gam, the Director of Fisheries and Aquaculture Policy. If you'd like to come up to the stage, please.
Good afternoon, dear authorities and colleagues. I'm honored to present Ecuador's commitment for this conference, which is titled Assessment of Water Quality of Licensed Sites for Bivalve Mollusk Farming. Now, this initiative aligns closely to the goals of a sustainable blue economy, promoting ocean-based development that is environmentally responsible, socially inclusive, and economically viable. Now, you may know, Ecuador's aquaculture sector has traditionally been dominated by white shrimp farming, and it's very good, I can tell you that. And the fact that this vast majority of the production has been dominated by shrimp, this heavy reliance on this single culture has been making the sector vulnerable, economically and also ecologically. So, to address this, bivalve mollusk farming, this is oyster farming, is emerging as a sustainable alternative, especially as one of the distinguished panelists here may enjoy this, through the efforts of fishermen's associations and communities, of course, supported by the government. So, this is a new activity just coming, we have to support it. So our project here wants to establish like a baseline water quality database which is absent, and we are trying to assess physical, chemical, microbiological parameters, heavy metal concentrations, and toxic algae. In this way, using this, we can aim to generate solid scientific data to support effective monitoring and, of course, management if the time comes so. That's it. We're time short, so thank you very much for your attention and support. Thanks to the government of Korea for this very nice and important meeting, and of course, thanks GGI for the Galapagos project for your support. I hope everybody, Galapagos is a once-in-a-lifetime trip. I hope everybody can visit it anytime. Thank you.
Thank you. Short and sweet, Mr. Gami. Thank you very much, Director of Fisheries and Aquaculture Policy from the Government of Ecuador. Next, let me invite up the European Commission of the European Union, Raphael Goulet, who is Deputy Director, should I say, for International Ocean Governance.
Good afternoon. Partnerships are at the core of the European Union action on the ocean, and the challenges that our ocean faces today cannot be addressed alone. They are global in nature, and so too needs to be our response. The Samoa Agreement for cooperation between the 27 EU member states and the 79 countries of the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States is a clear demonstration of our commitment to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. For the first time, our partnership under the Pacific Protocol of the Samoa Agreement includes an ocean chapter. The EU and the African, Caribbean and Pacific states have agreed to join forces on issues like ensuring sustainable fisheries, protecting marine biodiversity, or fighting against climate change. Through this partnership, I am pleased to announce on behalf of the European Union 120 million euro to support African and Pacific countries to strengthen ocean governance and develop their blue economy in a sustainable manner. This breaks down in 3 programs: 58 million euros for the Western Indian Ocean region, 42 million euros for Central Africa, and 20 million for the Pacific. This support is part of the EU's commitments to this 10th edition of Our Ocean, comprising 13 commitments worth 300 million euros to protect the ocean and promote sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Goulet, and thank you also to the European Commission of the European Union. Let's next invite, please, the Embassy of Belgium in Seoul, in South Korea, His Excellency Bruno Jans, who is the ambassador. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, esteemed colleagues, friends of Our Ocean, it is my privilege to join you today in Busan, where Belgium reaffirms not only its unwavering commitment to our shared marine heritage, but also its dedication to advancing practical, sustainable, and blue economy solutions. It is with this spirit of practical support and inclusive progress that I share our next contribution. Today, I'm pleased to announce that Belgium will support the participation of delegates from emerging economies at the 3rd UN Ocean Conference in Nice in June. This initiative will enable several representatives from nations that might otherwise face barriers to attendance and to bring their crucial perspectives to this vital global forum. This commitment represents Belgium's fundamental belief that effective ocean governance requires all voices to be heard. The solutions to our most pressing marine challenges will not emerge from the meeting rooms of traditional diplomatic centers alone. By supporting broader participation in global ocean dialogue, we aim to play our role in creating bridges between nations, connecting diverse perspectives to strengthen our collective response. This is not merely about ensuring representation, it's about enriching our shared understanding of marine challenges and opportunities. Belgium has long recognized the ocean challenges transcend national boundaries. From our leadership in forging collaborative initiatives to our support for marine science excellence, we have consistently advocated for inclusive approaches to ocean protection and supported partners across the world in collaborative efforts. As we gather here in South Korea, a country that understands profoundly the importance of maritime cooperation, let us recommit to an inclusive vision of ocean governance, one where every nation has a seat at the table and every voice contributes to shaping our blue future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jans from Belgium, ambassador here in South Korea. Next, let me invite the Korea Ocean Business Corporation, Byung-Jil An, who is the Chief Executive Officer.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am Byung-Jil An, CEO of KOBC, Korean Ocean Business Corporation. Today, I am pleased to announce our commitments, which includes the global transition toward a blue economy. Our company is committed to invest approximately $4.6 billion by 2030 to establish global green shipping, port, and logistic value chain. As a part of this commitment, first, in response to international environmental regulations, KOBC's investment of $3.5 billion will play a crucial role in supporting the transition to green ships. Second, our issuance of blue bonds with a scale of $300 million will make a significant contribution to the development of green shipping corridors. Third, KOBC will invest $680 million in developing eco-friendly smart port, setting a new standard in port sustainability. Also, extending beyond shipping and port, KOBC will promoting a greener marine industry through restructuring of aging ship fuel supply sector and establishing an ESG fund to accelerate marine carbon neutrality. Through these actions, KOBC will reaffirm our unwavering commitment to environmental stewardship and sustainability growth in global marine industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. An from the Korea Ocean Business Corporation. And last but not least, I believe, from the Rekam Nusantara Foundation, Dr. Heidi Retnonin Tias, who is the Ocean Program Director. Thank you.
Distinguished delegates, colleagues, and ocean champions, it is an honor to stand before you today to announce Rekam Nusantara Foundation's commitment advancing ocean accounts for sustainable blue economy. This is our first time taking part and announcing a commitment at the Our Ocean Conference, so we would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the opportunity. Since 2021, we have been working alongside the government of Indonesia to initiate and advance ocean accounts, an effort to place nature and the ocean at the heart of sustainable decision-making. We believe that a thriving blue economy must be built on the true value of our ocean assets. Through this commitment, we are focusing on 4 key actions. First, building capacity across government and local institutions. Second, piloting provincial-level ocean accounts in key regions. Third, mobilizing financing to sustain long-term implementation. And fourth, supporting the design of a national decision support system linking ocean data to policy, planning, and investment. To help realize these goals, Rekam Nusantara Foundation is proud to pledge $1.5 million towards strengthening ocean accounts and supporting evidence-based blue economy development over the next 3 years. Our impact is clear. The integration of ocean data into evidence-based policymaking is already enabling more sustainable, inclusive, and accountable blue economy development in Indonesia. This commitment builds on the legacy of past Our Ocean conferences, from advancing marine protection to promoting ocean knowledge. We echo the call to count what counts, because what gets measured gets managed. We welcome partnerships with governments, organizations, and communities to scale this work and ensure that blue economy benefits both the people and the planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Retnoning Tias, for that from the Rekam Nusantara Foundation. With that, we have actually reached the end of this session, and I believe I'm handing back to you. That's right.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give another big round of applause to our moderator and speakers for sharing their absolute valuable expertise with us. Thank you once again. Yes, and we will conclude the Blue Economy plenary session, and next the climate change session will reconvene at 4:30 p.m. after 20 minutes break. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you back. Thank you very much.
So, good afternoon, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the plenary session regarding the nexus between ocean and climate change. My name is Hyun Jenny Kim, the CEO of Global Industry Hub, which is a philanthropic collaborative focusing on industrial sector decarbonization. I'm very honored and pleased to moderate this very, very important session at our Ocean Conference, which focuses on the nexus between climate change and ocean. I think we are all united in our understanding that climate change is an urgent, science-based challenge that requires global collaboration and coordinated action. The ocean stands at the heart of this challenge, but it also stands at the heart of solutions. The ocean is a source of our life, of our planet. It plays a central role in regulating our climate, absorbing CO2 and extreme heat. And also, the ocean itself is under siege, because global warming, acidifying, and rising sea level and devastating impact of climate change actually bring a lot of challenges to ocean biodiversity, coastal ecosystems, and vulnerable communities. Despite these challenges, we all understand that the ocean also offers immense opportunities for climate solutions. Like ocean-based actions can significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions while providing a pathway towards sustainable development through the blue economy. From offshore renewable energy to low-carbon shipping, marine nature-based solutions to sustainable fisheries, there are many, many opportunities and great potential. Therefore, in this session, we will explore how to unlock the ocean's potential to mitigate climate change, adapt to its impacts, and foster economic innovation. We are privileged to hear from an excellent panelists at this session. Each panelist is representing diverse sectors: government, finance, technology, diplomacy, and many others. So I'm very pleased to have such a wonderful discussion this afternoon. Let me now introduce our panelists. My left side. I don't think actually I need to introduce this person. He is the champion of global climate action, and he is the founding father of our Ocean Conference, and he's the global leader who brought like ocean peace into climate action. So the former US State Secretary and Presidential Special Envoy on Climate, Mr. John Kerry. I'm so honored to have you this afternoon. Yes. And the next speaker is Mr. Toru Kubo, Senior Director for Climate Change and Sustainable Development at the Asian Development Bank. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Director Kubo has led the designing and implementation of innovative climate finance models across the Asia Pacific. So at this session, he is going to share what ADB and his team has achieved and what lessons he learned. And next speaker is Ambassador Julio Coronado, the Head of Environment, Climate Change, and Oceans at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile. Ambassador Coronado has been instrumental in shaping Chile's climate diplomacy and advancing ocean-based solutions. He is the leading negotiator of UN climate change negotiations and also the plastic negotiations as well. Therefore, I'm sure he is going to share many, many insights about global agreement. And the fourth speaker is Mr. Hwang Yun-sik, representing the private sector. He is the vice president and head of the Energy Solution R&D Center at Hanwha Ocean, a shipbuilding company. He will share insights into how green technology and innovations in shipbuilding sector are contributing to decarbonization efforts. Last but not least, our final speaker is Ambassador Dale Weber of Jamaica, Special Envoy for Climate Change and Environment. He is focusing on oceans and blue economy as well. With over 30 years of experience in marine science and academia, he brings a valuable perspective on the needs and solutions, particularly for small island developing countries. So each speaker will be given like 5-10 minutes to explain, to deliver his insights about nexus between climate action and oceans. So, having said that, let me invite State Secretary Kerry first of all. So it is a great honor to have you this afternoon. And you can be called as a champion who integrated ocean priorities with global climate efforts. So you created our Ocean Conference, and you led the US climate negotiation team for long years, and you were the critical mediator, broker to make the global agreement, the deal was done. So from your perspective, like what is necessary to bring ocean peace into the global climate actions? So how can we mainstreaming ocean elements in the global climate discussions and actions? Over to you.
Well, thank you. Whoops, sorry. We're on our own here. Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here with a very distinguished panel, and it's a pleasure to tackle this issue. Look, the ocean is not automatically on people's minds as having any relationship to climate. It's just a big, vast ocean, and ships go on it, and kids play on the beaches, and it's okay to use it as a dump. And we have enormous amounts of nitrates and other kinds of chemical overloads that go into rivers, flow down into the ocean, and frankly sort of kill all the oxygen in a certain area of the ocean. We have more than 500 dead spots in the ocean around the world because there's no oxygen, because it doesn't work, because the nitrates come in and kill it. So the life of the ocean is critical to our ability to be able to ultimately solve the climate crisis. The cause of the climate crisis is not the ocean. The cause of the climate crisis is our unwillingness to stop putting pollution in the form of methane or CO2 or other ingredients that wind up deteriorating the capacity of the ocean to flourish. Thank God, and I literally mean that the ocean turns out to be the largest consumer of carbon dioxide. It's what we call a sink. It contains the carbon dioxide, holds it in. Now, we actually don't know, and I think my science friends will ratify this, we don't know when that might stop. There are signs that maybe it's even now. Forests, which are also a sink, have shown a lack of capacity to continue to consume carbon, And the ocean has on occasion been measured to be regurgitating, to be kicking back carbon dioxide that it has consumed. So what we have to do is look at this relationship. Where can we find things within the ocean that are going to help improve our ability as we transition to not burning carbon without capturing the emissions, and we begin to get smarter about the sort of consequences of the choices that we make. By the way, not deciding to do something is a choice. It's the wrong choice. It's a dangerous consequence. And so where we are today is this. The amount of warming of the ocean that's taking place, it was, by the way, just as an example, 101 degrees Fahrenheit in the ocean waters off of Key West last summer. That's hot tub level of heat. That's the ocean too. And so we have to begin to do these connections. The warming of the ocean is the result of the fact that 90% of the warming of the planet goes into the ocean. And we don't even know all of the effects of that heating of the ocean on all of the fish, fauna, and life of the ocean. But a prudent approach to life and to governing would suggest that you want to reduce the potential of risk to things you don't know when you already see really dangerous things happening from the things you're observing. That seems to make sense. And so shipping contributes to the problems of the ocean. If shipping were a country, it would be the 8th largest emitter of carbon in the world. And so we have to curb the carbon that comes from shipping. That's beginning to happen now. That's come from a lot of things like the Ocean Conference, other initiatives, but we're starting now to refit ships to have propulsion systems that are not polluting and that are not putting carbon into the atmosphere. We need to have offshore wind. That's using the ocean, where you have really usually better wind than most places. You can harness the energy of clean energy. One turbine today, the largest turbines, which they've developed greater and greater capacity, is now able to produce about 20 megawatts of power. That's huge. And you can begin to provide power to places that haven't had it or that you need to power up in a way that's clean. Now, obviously, the wind doesn't blow 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, nor does the sun shine. So that's the problem of, well, how do you keep your energy at a level that your factories are able to continue to work and you don't have massive gaps in power? So to do that, storage is more critical. But now we're making huge advances in storage. So that's another way to help with the ocean, in the relationship between wind, sun, and storage. You also have blue carbon. Blue carbon is sort of the sinks. It's the effective way by which we protect marine ecosystems so that they can consume the carbon while we're still putting it up there. And finally, you have adaptation, where you need to take steps to be able to adapt and maintain that ecosystem in a way that's going to be able to create a virtuous cycle, not a killing cycle. So the bottom line is this, folks, and I sort of half mentioned this earlier in my opening comments, and then I'll close. We know what this problem is. This is not something where we need a massive amount of new research to tell us what's happening. These folks here have done much of that research. We've had the IPCC reports. We've had countless other analyses. There is a universal agreement around the world from any worthy, when I say, legitimate scientist who isn't paid to come up with a report for an industry. But there's a true understanding globally that it is the burning of fossil fuel without capturing emissions and the pollution that comes from things like methane that leaks at the wellhead, it leaks in storage, it leaks in shipping, it leaks in the last mile to the house. And that can result, methane is 20 to 80 times more destructive than carbon dioxide. So there are various gases that are just plain old pollution, which we are allowing to go up into the atmosphere, and that is creating our crisis. And that is why in Dubai, almost 200 nations came together a couple of years ago at the COP and announced that we must transition away from fossil fuel so as to achieve net zero by 2050, according to the science, which means holding the Earth's temperature increase to a level where we can actually adapt, where we can minimize the cost to property and loss of life. And the IPCC scientists said to us, you have 12 years, this is in 2018, you have 12 years within which to make the decisions and implement them to avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. Now, as we sit here today, we have 5 years, and we're not doing enough. We could do it, we could win, but we have to make a different set of choices. And the ocean is a critical component of being able to solve this problem, and understanding the relationship between the problem and the ocean is a critical start in deciding what good policies you want to put in place.
Thank you very much. So you emphasize that we have enough scientific evidence, we have enough research outcome. What we need indeed at this moment is a very proactive action, making a right choice.
We have enough to understand the problem. We can use more research and more development to see if there are other ways to solve or whatever we can do. Well, I'm not saying stop the research, but I am saying the research we have to date confirms that we know what is happening.
Yes, so what we already have actually is providing like enough understanding to us about the seriousness of the ocean's circumstance due to the climate change. Thank you very much for sharing your insight. And I'd like to invite Director Kubo from Asian Development Bank. Actually, you are representing the Multilateral Development Bank, who are supporting many developing countries in strong climate action. So why don't you share your achievement or your lessons learned in the ocean and climate action nexus?
Sure. Thank you, Ambassador Kim, and good afternoon to everyone here. And thank you to the organizers, Government of Korea, the City of Busan, and WRI, who really put an effort to put this together. It's really an honor being part of this distinguished panel. It's not every day that you follow Secretary Kerry, which is a major task. I was wondering, we have a strong team here who's been working on oceans and climate change. There's a lot of material, there's a lot of things we do on finance, and we support developing countries across Asia Pacific. I had to pick the examples, but we have 5 minutes each. But Secretary Kerry fortunately covered many things, so maybe I'll skip those. But the first point was really the urgency. And Secretary Kerry mentioned about IPCC, so the group of scientists already published, and the conclusion is that to stay within 1.5 degrees and have a 50% chance, we have a planet's carbon budget of 500 gigatons. And we're burning through that budget 40 gigatons plus per year, and that was 2020. So, Secretary, you mentioned 5 years. We have less than 10 years, really, 5 to 10 years before going into overshoot scenario, which is overshooting that trajectory that's necessary, which is really dangerous. And when we exceed that point, the research is still unclear on when exactly we trigger those tipping points. And when we say tipping points, you know, it's a ship that gradually tilts over. And then once it flips over, you can't do anything about it. You can't bring the ship back up, and we lose control. It's beyond human influence. No country or people can adapt to a runaway climate scenario. We are already suffering. We're talking about 2.5 degrees or even higher. That is the global average temperature. But fortunately, our oceans water absorbs heat very efficiently. Most people live on land. On land, that's 4 degrees average increase. We don't talk about this too much. In the higher latitudes, it's 6 degrees. Well, what's 6 degrees? 1 degree increase is 7% increase in moisture. So 6 degrees is 40% increase in the atmospheric moisture, and it hits the cold mass and comes pouring down. Our countries, our infrastructure, our systems are not equipped to handle this kind of changes in water flow, hydrologic flow. And so we have to avoid this runaway climate scenario. So my main point is we are really running out of time, and we must scale solutions now. This is not either or. We have to keep doing the research and bring costs down, but we know the solutions. We don't have time to debate. We have to scale now. Now, second, welcome to Asia Pacific, beautiful host country of Korea. We are part of a global multilateral system. Asian Development Bank, we cover Asia Pacific. The Asia Pacific is already more than half of annual human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. Now, of course, historically, a smaller portion, but today it's already more than half. I had the honor of working with Secretary Kerry's team on the Just Energy Transition Partnership for the last couple years. The fossil fuel assets in Asia Pacific are very young. They're about 12 years average. They're going to run for another 30, 40 years. If we do not accelerate the transition, the whole global community will suffer. The fight against climate change, we have to take a global approach. We need everybody, but it will be won or lost in Asia if we don't address emissions here. Now, at the same time, Asia Pacific is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, as we heard over and over again, especially those coastal communities. So we have a vicious negative cycle happening, that is climate impacts severely damaging nature, and the value of nature and contribution to addressing climate change, absorbing greenhouse gases and enhancing resilience being further eroded. And we have to spin this, turn this around into what Secretary Kerry mentioned as a virtuous cycle. We need to incentivize investments in nature-positive areas and to contribute to absorbing greenhouse gases, enhancing resilience, and biodiversity, that triple crisis that we have. We've already heard very encouraging examples from around the world, and ADB, together with many development partners, we are trying to accelerate this virtual cycle across the Asia Pacific at scale. Now, just a few concrete examples on financing. We are a development bank. We provide financing. We've made serious commitments to climate financing. So a couple years ago, we said that between 2019 to 2030, we will provide 100 billion in cumulative climate finance, at least 1/3 in adaptation. We're well on track. Last year alone, we provided 11 billion from ADB's own financing. More importantly, we crowded in other partners, co-financiers, and private sector. Together with the MDBs, we have committed to $120 billion annually by 2030, and that contribute to the breakthrough in Baku last year, although it's still not enough, but it was a start. We have set new targets to reach 50% of all our financing to contribute to climate mitigation adaptation. So just to be clear, 100% of what development banks do, they are for development. Right? But at least 50% of all of that financing contribute to climate change mitigation adaptation. That is a new goal that we have set. Specifically on oceans, over the last 5 years, we've provided nearly 4 billion in investments in healthy oceans, improved ocean health and climate action from the Indian Ocean to Southeast, to East Asia, and of course the Pacific. So we're putting, together with other IFIs and development banks, nature-positive ocean-based investments at the heart of our strategy. These are not pilots, right? These are real projects with tangible outcomes. Are we happy about it? No. Is it enough? No, absolutely not. It's a drop in the ocean, right? Pun intended. We have to really scale up, and we're doing so. So one of the new initiatives is the Sustainable and Resilience Maritime Initiative, and it's a fund. We will take a blended finance approach. We have a session tomorrow. I have to put in that plug. Please, if you're interested in it, please come. And that is going to help with green shipping and other approaches. Maritime renewable energy, for example, we have been supporting floating photovoltaic, near shore photovoltaic, offshore wind, the secretary mentioned, tidal energy, electric transport, including ferries, and then of course ecosystem restoration. So these are the coral reefs, the mangroves, seagrass. I have my colleagues here who can explain more. But lastly, just 1 minute, is even more important than finance is a policy and enabling framework. This connects with the previous session on incentivizing businesses. We need to mobilize private investment in climate and ocean solutions. So the strength that development banks have is that we work with every line ministry, ocean, fisheries, energy, transport, urban, but our counterpart is finance and development planning. We can bring all these conversations together, and we have private sector finance and public sector finance. We can consult with private sector and identify the regulatory and policy bottlenecks. We have done this successfully to support Indonesia and Philippines in marine debris, in healthy coastal ecosystems, and energy transition. What are the bottlenecks? This is a new economy, blue economy. The policies and regulations are outdated. Can we bring our forces together and invest in technical assistance on policy analysis and help draft the regulations for the countries so they can drive the blue economy? I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Kubo. Yes, there is there is a praise from the audience about your insightful presentation. You underscored the urgency, and also you brought Asia Pacific region at the center of the discussion of the urgency, and also you highlighted what incentives actually we need. So you shared the ADB's many initiatives and programs to provide finance to the developing countries from the perspective of development. That's why you emphasize mitigation and adaptation finance, 50-50 ratio. And also finally, you highlighted the role of the private sector, and I'm very pleased that we have a representative private sector at this panel discussion. So you mainly talked about Asia Pacific. Now we will move to the different geography. So I'm very glad to invite Ambassador Cordano from Chile. So actually Chile is a leading country in discussion of ocean and climate action. So please share the policy of your country, what success you have made, what lessons you learned. Over to you.
Thank you very much. It's also great to be here on this panel. And I wanted to share some of that, of course, from Latin America, from a country that is 4,000 kilometers long, has a very long coastline. So we are facing the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean in the world. So that really created an imprint in our own view of the world, I guess. So what I wanted to bring today to the panel discussion is precisely our own struggle and efforts to bring the ocean into climate negotiations. And when we go back to the history of the Paris Agreement at the beginning, in the first draft, it didn't have any mention of the ocean. Even if the convention, the UNFCCC, already mentions the ocean as a sink, but not as the complexity that Secretary Kerry and the previous speakers also were mentioning about the complexities of and the urgency at the same time of having climate change in the ocean or climate action in the ocean. So it was very important, and back in 2015, this is no coincidence, Chile hosted the second Our Ocean Conference in Valparaiso, in Chile. Secretary Kerry was also there helping us because the first Our Ocean Conference, of course, happened in Washington under his leadership. But this second Our Ocean Conference in 2015 was really an eye-opener for us. Through that conference, I think there was a full realization of the importance of bringing the ocean to the climate discussions. And of course, 2 months later in Paris, we managed to adopt the Paris Agreement, which recognized the importance of the ocean after lots of work, after many conversations, but we managed to pull a good result, and the ocean was recognized as part of the agreement, at least in the preamble. But it was a specific recognition, and that was the basis for future action. You know, I wanted to just fast forward to 2019, a very, very important year for this, in this topic. It was our year. It was the COP25 under the presidency of Chile, and we call that COP the Blue COP. And our aim was precisely to solidify the progress that we made in the Paris Agreement by creating a concrete outcome in the climate negotiations for the ocean. That year was also the year where the IPCC presented the report of the ocean and the cryosphere, which was really, again, another very important moment in this process. And that report made us realize not only that the issue of the ocean and climate was important, but it was also urgent, multidimensional, that is not only an environmental issue, it's also something that touches the livelihoods of people. So, the outcome of the COP in 2015 was the creation of a dialogue. Therefore, it was the decision to sit down and talk about this. And as you might remember, in 2020, the pandemic came, so we had to organize a dialogue virtually. But actually it didn't matter, because I think the dialogue really proved very resilient. And at the following COPs, parties decided to hold this dialogue annually, and with co-facilitators to lead discussions on focus topics and produce reports for specific and actionable recommendations. And actually, I had the honor to be one of those initial co-facilitators with my good friend from Canada, Niall O'Dea. Now, after 2 years of that work, we have passed the baton to Brazil and Belgium. So we have now a space after 5 years, or more than 10 years actually, we have now finally a space to talk about the ocean and climate. So how difficult it is, even with the urgency that previous speakers have mentioned, how urgent it is really to have ocean and climate action, and yet multilateralism is somehow slow in recognizing this importance and recognizing the need to have a space. And there is a long way. You know, in these 2 years, we have really just scratched the surface. We have talked about basic stuff, ecosystem restoration, blue foods and fisheries, technologies for the ocean. Those are the topics that we focused our discussions in the first 2 years. But this year, we have a very, very important opportunity, because countries will have to present new NDCs, new and enhanced NDCs, nationally determined contributions. And I'm really very sure that countries will include the ocean in their NDCs. And, you know, we hope that countries will touch upon other topics that are also very important for climate action, like fisheries resilience, sea level rise, blue carbon was mentioned, acidification, coastal restoration, and marine ecosystem adaptation. And I wanted to also share with you what we are doing in Chile. We have already a first draft of our new nationally determined contribution. And what we are doing there, and you may know that Chile has been one of the leading countries in protecting our own jurisdictional waters. We have 43% already protected or under some level of protection. And what we're doing here is to make a connection between that conservation policy and our climate objectives. So what we're doing is, as we are implementing our MPAs, we are evaluating and assessing the climate benefits of those MPAs, both for mitigation and for adaptation. So that's our approach, but of course many other countries will have different approach. I think it's important also to mention that we not only have now under the UNFCCC special space in the dialogue, but also we have been, I think the process has recognized the importance of this topic. And for example, Secretary Kerry was referring to the GST outcome, transitioning away from fossil fuels, and the same decision, there is a very specific reference to the ocean dialogue and the importance to move forward with climate action in the ocean for mitigation and for adaptation. And you know, the reason why this is so important is that the ocean is a dynamic place. According to a recent report of the OECD, if the ocean was a country, it would be the world's 5th largest economy. And the same report indicates that that economy, that today is the 5th largest economy, has doubled in size in the last 25 years. And you know, the ocean keeps receiving the pressure of our own livelihoods and our own style of life. The ocean provides food for 3 billion people globally. And it's a source of culture, it's a source of inspiration, and it's a source of well-being. So, I think the last comment that I want to make is that now that 10 years have gone after the Paris Agreement was adopted, it's the 10th anniversary of this conference, but also it's the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. So it's a moment to reflect a little bit about our own progress. And I think just to admit that our struggle to include the ocean in the climate negotiation is still going on. And we are just, as I was saying, scratching the surface of the link between ocean and climate. And this is more important than ever. And I just wanted to mention also very important things that my predecessor mentioned about finance. You know, Chile and Korea, we are going to be hosts of UNOC 4 in 2028, in 3 years' time. And I think very clearly that one of the elements that are most needed in our debate is precisely how we can make sure that the needs that are represented in the ocean and climate action, the ocean restoration, and our ocean policies are well funded. We have failed in that task. And I think it's very important that we take those examples, we look at the motivations, and I really take away the message that enabling environments, right policies at the right time, with good consultation processes, those are the policies that will stay long, and those are the policies that will make sure that our efforts achieve good things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you for sharing the Chile's tireless efforts to bring ocean peace into the center of global climate agenda. And also thank you very much for mentioning the 2035 NDC. Many countries are still developing their ambitious target, and I hope that ocean is going to be integrated as a key piece in the NDCs of many countries. And finally, I strongly hope that Chile and Korea will host the UN Ocean Conference in 3 years, so we cross fingers. Let me just invite the next speaker, Vice President Huang from Hanwha Ocean. Actually, previous speaker mentioned the very significant role of private sector. He is from ship industry, shipbuilding company, so he's going to share his insight what companies, what private sector needs to advance the climate action in ocean space. Mr. Huang, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for introduction. I'm happy to be here to speak of the role of the shipbuilding sector in the effort for global environment protection. Actually, I will use some slides briefly. The era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. Those were the proper words of UN Secretary urging the world to take radical actions. Ocean temperatures continue to rise every decade. Since 1901, the average sea surface temperature has risen by about 0.1 degrees Celsius per decade. They may not sound like much, however, our ocean is quite losing its breath. What is making the Earth boil? How much of that heat is maritime industry responsible for? The transportation sector is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions after the energy sector. Shipping plays a massive role in global trade, such as 90%, but it also contributes about 3% of total emissions. Sounding small. However, if the shipping industry moves toward net zero, it could have a ripple effect across the entire global supply chain. The maritime industry is pushing forward with decarbonization, guided by stronger regulations from both the IMO, International Maritime Organization, and the EU. Both aim to achieve net zero by 2050. At the recent MEPC 83rd meeting in London, the IMO set emissions limits and introduced greenhouse gas pricing. This regulation encourages the use of low or zero alternative fuels to drastically cut emissions. Shipping industry is steadily adopting eco-friendly solutions. A major focus is on alternative fuels, but no clear winner has emerged yet. Fuel-related infrastructure is gradually being built up, and major global ship owners are carefully evaluating their investment strategies. In this transitional period of uncertainty, bold and proactive decisions by shipping companies play a crucial role. Hanwha is working to reduce the uncertainty in the maritime industry by diversifying and optimizing eco-friendly ship solutions with the goal of making carbon neutrality a reality. While we aim for fully zero carbon shipping, we recognize that we are currently in a transitional phase. As a result, a wide range of solutions are being developed and applied. These include the ships powered by lower emission fuels equipped with advanced technologies like air lubrication systems, rotor sails, and the onboard carbon capture and storage systems, and even smart or artificial intelligence-driven solutions to enhance operational efficiency of ships. However, the ultimate goal must be the complete shift to zero carbon ships that emit no carbon at all. This requires replacing conventional fossil fuels with truly carbon-free alternatives. We Hanwha resort how vessels are powered, not just from fuel perspective, but the engines as well. That is why we are developing ammonia-fueled gas turbine, a true step toward zero carbon shipping. Yeah, actually I want to see a clear sky and clear ocean, and also hope our children and their children to enjoy the sky and ocean. We should watch and whip ourselves to see how these efforts become reality and how we put in the efforts. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Vice President Wang. There is a technology to significantly reduce the greenhouse gas emission in shipping and shipbuilding industry. I think the real issue is how to scale up and how to speed up, and what is going to be the what is going to be the measure to solve the cost issue. So if time allows, let me go back to this matter, this question over to you later. By the way, last but not least, I'd like to invite Ambassador Weber from Jamaica. He's the climate change ambassador in his country. And as a climate envoy of small island developing countries, Ambassador Weber, actually I think you have many things to say about the nexus between climate action and ocean. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kim, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. If I say Jamaica, you say Usain Bolt, you say Bob Marley. So in the next 5 minutes, I will sprint while I sing my story about what we're doing in Jamaica. What actions can be taken to reduce carbon in our oceans? If I, however, tell you that Jamaica is a country which takes this very seriously, Jamaica is one of the countries in terms of the ocean panel, which puts us with great responsibility to deal with the issues that surround us. Towards that end, we have decided that the 30 by 30 is a must. Unlike many countries, our land protection is only at about 14%, but our marine protection is at 26%, and rapidly getting to that 30 by 30, we think it's an achievable goal. We have about 300 protected areas. The question is, how do you police them? And I'm going to leave a number of gems, but one of them is partnerships. And we have just received 6 vessels from the Japanese government, which allows us to patrol that large EEZ so that we can in fact say that we have protected and we are maintaining what we have. But it's important that we think about where we're going, as conservation is the best tool. In conservation, you're keeping your carbon where it is. But we're a developing country, so we must accept that development will happen and there will be things to be built. As of 2017, our National Environment and Planning Agency has set a new policy. It's a no net loss policy. For every hectare, every square meter of mangrove, seagrass, or coral reef that is removed because there is a wonderful hotel to be built, which is going to improve development, or there is an airport runway to be extended so we can bring in more tourists. That has come with a no net loss, meaning whoever is developing must replace equal to or larger than the area. Now, how do we make that happen? Second gem, we combine academia with decision-making policies. In my former life, I was the director of the Center for Marine Sciences at the University of the West Indies. And we found that by having 2 marine labs, we could harness seedlings. And here you see mangrove seedlings, 6,000 produced per year, so that whenever there is need for development, we readily provide them at a cost to developers so that they can now put back that no net loss policy. We've been able to do this and increase our mangrove coverage, actually, and large areas have been determined and identified for development even before they're set for further growth. So for us, partnerships work. We do it as well with coral reefs, where we do both in situ and ex situ coral reef growth, using labs and using techniques to try and get the carbon out of the water so that the balance between air and sea is maintained and our coral reefs will pick up that carbon. It's a system that can work. Mangroves, seagrass, coral reefs are the ecosystems that take carbon, but at the same time, they are contributing in terms of our carbon sequestration. But an important part is knowing what your carbon is. We were involved in a project funded by the Pew Charter and TNC to determine the carbon in Jamaica. We used the IPCC method, which I will confess I had never used before. Circular quadrats are not really quadrats, but they are the accepted method to gather data. And we were able to determine the carbon at selected sites around Jamaica in both our mangroves and seagrass based on this. And colleagues have mentioned the NDCs. We are now putting, Jamaica's about to complete its NDC 3.0, and carbon, in terms of what the carbon stock is for Jamaica, are a part of that NDC. We were able to combine with TNC to get good aerial coverage for our mangrove and seagrasses for all of Jamaica. Because what you want for an NDC is that one big magic number. What is your carbon? So you can then put it into an equation. Well, the numbers surprised me. And here's a third gem. Follow the data, let the science make the decision. We found that our mangrove, which we thought would have been our greatest carbon sequester, our greatest carbon content, would have had outstanding values. It turned out to be about 4.6 million megagrams of carbon in terms of 4.6 million. Seagrasses, not because of how much biomass is there, but because of how much is locked below ground, that turned out to be 7.5 megagrams in terms of million megagrams, and that's because of the area that is covered. So colleagues, we need to look at our systems, not just for the ecosystem service, but for the value that they produce. Now, I've talked about keeping carbon in. I've talked about pulling carbon out. But how about if we don't put the carbon forward? And my colleagues have mentioned this. Jamaica has the largest transshipment port in the Caribbean. We bring ships into the Caribbean and send them on. We therefore have a responsibility, as my colleague just mentioned, to try and manage how those ships come into the Caribbean. It is clear that the mechanism using the greenhouse, the GHG analysis, just trying to reduce energy is not going to change it. We're going to have to change the fuel. So there are 4,000 vessels that come into Jamaica each year. If we can start to influence what those vessels do, would we not be making a great contribution? So in Jamaica, we've decided we are already going with reducing the sulfur, the fuel sulfur cap, and looking at how we can reduce the areas in which high sulfur vessels. To do that, our Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica now combines, which is actually just beside our shipping yard, combines to refine fuel. Now we have low sulfur fuel that is available. So if you bring your ships to Jamaica, we will give you low sulfur fuel. In fact, we've now started LNG, and we can now provide LNG to all vessels that come to Jamaica. That reduces the GHG output. Having done so well at it, we're actually thinking about how can we get hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol, which is the new way forward, and we can make a difference. So Jamaica has come up with a long-term emissions policy. It's a strategy as to how we're going to move. For instance, by 2030, we wish to have 50% of the country's generation of electricity completely from renewable energies. Already, 50% of our public transport system is from electric and LNG buses. We also intend to increase our mangrove replanting up to about 4,000 hectares. So we think we have a responsibility to make a difference because of where we are. A small island developing state with a high development need will have to make compromises. The decisions we take are important. When we need to take them? Now. But we need to collectively look for partnerships to make the difference. It is our ocean. It is our action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Weber, for sharing excellent cases of your country, Jamaica. It's time for our discussion. By the way, let me just ask a very quick question to you, because what you just presented to us is really a result of very coordinated and integrated approach across the sector, across the government. So I'm very curious what type of governance system you have in order to bring about this very comprehensive and integrated outcome in the nexus of ocean and climate.
Thank you very much for the question, Ambassador Kim. So in Jamaica, we have a Climate Change Advisory Board, which is appointed by the Prime Minister, who is the person who put himself forward and the country forward as a member of the Ocean Panel. That board is made up of academia. I actually chair the board for my troubles, but I chaired it while I was a professor at the university. So we bring academia with all the government agencies. So you take transport as well as energy, you take shipping, you take environment, you take all the components, and then you take some private sector interests. You bring them all to the table and you have a discussion as to what the goals should be, and you set 1 year, 3 year, 5 year goals. 5 years because that's usually the term of a government, and governments tend to work within their time frame. But in 5 years, you can achieve a lot if you have all persons at the table. The key is to manage that interaction and have all voices heard so that they think and believe that their contribution is being heard and can make a difference. Give a little and you get a lot.
Thank you. Let me just ask a question to Ambassador Cordano, if you allow me to do so. Because this year, the COP30 will be held in Belém, Brazil. or another Latin American country. And you are leading the climate change negotiation for long years, and also you are leading the plastic negotiation as well. By the way, I mean, people are quite curious about the key outcome of the COP30 in this year. Of course, it is too early to make a guess or assess at this point. However, from your point of view, what will be the key elements to be highlighted at COP30 this year, particularly relating to the ocean, maybe? Over to you.
Thank you. Well, I think this year is clearly going to be the opportunity to see what the measure of efforts we're doing in our NDCs. You know, the NDCs will need to be, they were supposed to be presented by February. Most countries have not presented the NDCs, but I think a vast majority of countries will have their NDCs communicated by September. And then the UNFCCC will have to produce a synthesis report of that. And that will give us a sense of how far or how close we are to the 1.5 trajectory of the Paris Agreement. I think we cannot fool ourselves. Probably we will be far from that still. So the question at COP30, in my opinion, will be what do we do now? How we can collectively react to that reality. And I think the Brazilian incoming presidency has very clearly indicated that this is also their intention. They are talking about ambition. They are talking about participation, inclusion in the process of the discussions, and they have included the concept of mutirao. And the concept of mutirao means when a community gets together and is facing a collective crisis, how do we come together and discuss our way forward? And I think that is precisely what is going to happen in Belém. My feeling is that from Belém, we will have a new impulse of climate action. And I'm particularly very thrilled and happy that Brazil is co-leading also the Ocean and Climate Dialogue that will happen very soon in Bonn in June. So I hope that we will also be able to include some clear references to the importance of the ocean climate action in the context of that collective reaction.
Thank you. Let me ask a question to the Director Kubo. You mentioned that climate finance is important. It can play a huge role. However, at the same time, how to ensure enabling environment for climate finance. That is a key in making climate finance really effective. So from your experience, working with many like Asia-Pacific countries, what is the key elements of such enabling environments to make climate finance really effective?
Right, big question. It's very context specific. So each country you have to start with a thorough analysis, diagnostics. And one partner is certainly not enough to do that. So the most important is development partner coordination and working with the government and then civil society, academic institutions, private sector. And so it's that stakeholder convening mechanism. Some countries already have that, as in the case of Jamaica that we just heard. Many countries don't have that for climate change, or they may have that, but it's weak because it never had some of the core decision-making ministries not involved. In many cases, finance had not been involved in the climate discussions for a long time in developing countries. So fortunately, most of the developing member countries, and I'm talking about ADB's development member countries for now truly appreciate that climate change is exacerbating the core development challenges that were already there. And it's going to hinder the achievements of their sector development priorities, economic development priorities. Also, there are opportunities on the transition side that can make them more energy secure and independent and create an economy for the future. You know, I still remember this conversation with a cabinet member in Indonesia and also Azerbaijan that was called presidency, and the economy is dominated by fossil fuels. And that cabinet member is known to have very strong connections. However, they both said that they cannot leave a sunset industry for the next generation. They need to leave that growth economy and diversify. This is where countries see the opportunities. And so the conversation on climate change is now coming to the finance, the development planning or economic planning, and of course at the top level, the leadership level. And so these climate change commissions or coordinating committees, it's under the mandate of the president or the prime minister. We're seeing that change in the conversation. Now, we need to see the change in the system, right? So, for example, Philippines is a leader in tagging budget for climate contribution on resilience. Armenia is another leader in the region. So every part of development budget allocation, they also tag for its climate contribution, and they have to report on that use. So it's a dual benefit. Yeah. So that's something that really it's a policy shift, it's a coordination shift. Another area is we talked about private sector mobilization. So let's say offshore wind. There's still many conflicting policies that make it difficult for private sector to come in and secure the area to invest in, let's say, wind, because of the zoning rules and the other sort of the industries and protection coming first. There isn't that consultative process, and then the business permitting process. Also, the offtake of that energy is a challenge, it's a risk. Oftentimes, it is very risky for the wind turbine provider and the project developer to also invest in the subsea cable to the offtake to the substation onshore. That is a part of the, oftentimes, the state utility or the transmission operator, and that regulation is lacking. So I'm only mentioning a few examples, but this type of it's policy diagnostics, and they're good tools, and they're knowledge centers that do this. Alignment and misalignment of policy. In the developing countries, there's so much misalignment, but it's unintentional misalignment. If it's intentional to protect the poor, that's okay, but we have to remove this unintentional misalignment of policy regulations.
And that is one of the roles of ADB, to discuss with countries to remove the unintentional barriers for the private sector's investment.
Exactly, together with many, many partners coming together on that technical assistance. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. We discussed a lot about ocean's potential in climate action. We discussed finance, we discussed like technology, and we discussed the policy as well. But if I just capture just one very, very important thing, crucial thing is political willingness, it's political leadership. Yes, panelists are nodding. So let me just invite Secretary Kerry as final commenter. So how can we build like global, coordinated political leadership in climate action? I mean, when we look at the global like macroeconomics, now many countries are focusing on tariff issues or the economic downturn issues. So people are afraid of the economic just delay, and some people are worried about like climate action's delay as well in a very, very frank way. So how can we restore, rebuild the collective political leadership for climate action? From your insight, Secretary Kerry, over to you.
Well, thank you. I think leadership is absolutely critical, and it comes in different forms in different places at different times. it is critical to have governments, public leadership, committed. In Canada yesterday, they had an election, and Mark Carney, happens to be a friend of mine, I'm happy about that, was elected he's going to be the Prime Minister. And he's deeply committed to this issue. He, as a banker, helped organize all the banking institutions of the world in the Global Banking Alliance, which contributed significantly to things we were able to do in, the various meetings, the various COPs, Paris. Later, actually, he did this later. It was around Glasgow, and then Sharm el-Sheikh, and ultimately in Dubai, and very helpful. That's going to make a difference. Having Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico, our southern neighbor, there's a certain irony here. You have a funny sandwich, with Canada and Mexico, and then right in between, you decide. But leadership is absolutely critical, and the best thing that can happen, let me just stop myself there for a minute. Not only do you need government policy. You need government to have an incentive like the IRA. But, and it's a big but, no government in the world has enough money to effect this transition. Let's understand that. If we want to win this battle, and we all do, we have to be able to raise the big bucks. That's the trillions, not the billions even. And by the way, the world has had a huge problem just trying to even raise 100 billion every year for the last years, which was the promise of Paris. So that's not going to solve the problem. So as human beings, we've got to all ask ourselves, hey, okay, this doesn't work, that doesn't work, what's going to work? Well, what's going to work is getting more people in countries all around the world demanding of their leaders that they perhaps follow them, since they won't lead on their own. And following them means having an impact in elections, where you have elections. There are enough critical countries here that are democracies and that have the ability to be able to go out and make a difference. And I'll be very specific. This problem is a problem, I have said again and again, of emissions that are not captured. So the emissions levels are rising, and that's what creates this film over the planet, which restrains the amount of heat that can escape, and that's why it goes somewhere else and it warms. And the warming is obviously, in the ocean's case, creating this massive amount of moisture that goes up into the atmosphere, and then it falls in the form of rain, and we have flooding and massive amounts. Why? Because there's so much more moisture, because there's the warming. So this is absolutely discernible cause and effect. And people, every person sitting here, every person around the world has got to decide, what am I going to do? Am I going to change things, or am I going to just accept this trend that we are on, this trend line? Now, and I'll give you an example of where it makes a difference. When I returned from service in the war in Vietnam, the first thing I did was not actually protest the war, which I did not too long after that, but I became involved in organizing Earth Day, the first Earth Day in the United States on April 22nd, 1970. But we didn't just bring 20 million people out of their homes to demonstrate and say, hey, you guys who are supposed to be leading, we want clean air, we want clean water. Back then, you couldn't see across the city of Los Angeles. You couldn't see across New York. Air was horrible, putrid. We had a river that famously in Ohio, the Cuyahoga River, lit on fire, burned on the river because of this oily slick that was out there and the pollution that was taking place. So, bottom line, we decided it wasn't enough to have 20 million people demonstrate and walk down the street. It was great. It was very important. It was impactful on a lot of people. But what we did was we made democracy work. We targeted the 12 worst votes on the environment in the US Congress. And in the next election, we worked to defeat them. And guess what? We defeated 7 of the 12 in that election. Then what happened? Well, the other politicians, the survivors, went, oh my God, this is a voting issue. And so Richard Nixon, then President of the United States, decided, I better sign this into law. We passed the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Coastal Zone Management Act, the Endangered Species Act, and we created the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States, which we didn't even have at that point in time. All of that came out of citizen action, demanding that we make our elections accountable. Now, here's the deal, folks. All of the developed world, most of which are democracies that work and are trying to function, they're the biggest polluters. 48 sub-Saharan African countries equal 0.55% of all the emissions. So all the problem isn't coming from Africa yet. Not now. It's about 23 countries that equal more than 80% of all the emissions. And those are developed countries with a lot of money. The United States, my country, is the wealthiest country in the world still, and it has about an enormous multi-trillion-dollar economy, about 23 or somewhere we were anyway. It's probably gone down a bit now. And the next closest is China, which doesn't want to call itself a developed country, but is highly developed. And it is the second richest country in the world. So you need China and the United States, and then the EU, Germany, Italy, France, UK, other countries, and you need Korea, Canada, Brazil, Japan. You get the picture. You've got about those key countries. If they were to step up, put the money on the table, help create a process where we agree how we're going to solve the problem, we could actually solve this problem, deploy the renewable energy necessary, back it up with batteries for the moment, and even small modular nuclear, geothermal. There are roads which we could actually use. We just don't choose to do it. People are either indifferent or lazy or greedy or don't want to be part of this transition. And the transition, I want to just end on this. We have to get people to understand the transition doesn't lead to a worse life. It doesn't lead to a loss of job. It leads to a better life. It actually cleans up the air we breathe. Currently, 7 million people a year die because of bad air quality. We are now seeing a pandemic of colon cancer, of pancreatic cancer, at least in our country, and I'm highly suspicious. I can't prove it yet, or now, nor can anyone. But there's a massive amount of interruption in our functioning of our bodies because of plastic, microplastic that goes into our food because of the bad air and other qualities. So we're just not making decisions to actually take care of ourselves, to really build the future the way we want it. So you say, what's the best way to do this? Best way to do this, folks, is implement the things we know will make the difference now. There's a huge amount of money to be made in this transition. It's the biggest market the world has ever known, the energy market, and the transition to it. We need to build new grids. We need the AI centers. We need all these new sources of energy. We need to have, I mean, the United States, we can't even send an electron from New York to California, or a molecule. That's insane. We can go to the moon, but we've got to start putting our money and our effort and our energy into doing the things that actually make a real difference in our lives. And the choices of this economic transition will make the whole world healthier, cleaner, safer than we are today. Why we don't choose it, we need a good psychologist up here or somebody else, but we need to examine our own systems and our own countries and our own governments. We can win this battle, but only if we make a different set of choices.
Thank you very much, Secretary Kerry, for sharing your insight and also sharing your so touching experience in the past. I would like to bring this discussion to the end because we had wonderful panel discussion. Now we are going to move to the presentation of commitment session because we have commitment presenters waiting for announcing their commitment in climate and ocean area. So let me just
call one by one presenters, and you come to the stage and make a presentation about your commitment. The first committer is Lydia Bulcao, Vice Minister of Maritime Affairs of Portugal.
Distinguished speakers and guests, dear panelists, I would like to thank firstly to our Ocean Conference for the opportunity to showcase Portugal's contribution to the collective action on climate change. We are committed to implementing both mitigation and adaptation measures to addressing the growing impact of climate change. On the side of mitigation measures, we are accelerating the energy transition of maritime freight and passenger transport, representing an investment of around $57 million. Portugal is actively supporting decarbonization interventions in vessels, particularly those over 5,000 gross tons. We are also reinforcing our early warning systems for geophysical and seismic monitoring with an investment of over $5 million as an example of ongoing adaptation measures. This initiative enables the anticipation and response to extreme events through improved detection infrastructure, cybersecurity, and real-time risk communication. This commitment has significant impact not only across the Portuguese mainland and of the Portuguese archipelagos of the Azores and Madeira, but also through a huge area of the Middle North Atlantic. Portugal's vision for sustainability and economic growth motivated the presentation of these two commitments, along with 6 others submitted to the Conference on Sustainable Blue Economy and Marine Protected Areas, representing a total estimated investment of over $367 million. There's no doubt that sustainability opens the door to new and better economic activities, helping secure the long-term prosperity of the blue economy and the well-being of future generations. Concrete actions, scientific investments, strong partnerships. All these commitments embodies Portugal's ongoing effort to lead by example and uphold our identity as a maritime nation. We stand ready to share our experience and help foster a more healthier and resilient ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Minister, for sharing Portuguese leadership. The next presenter is the Director of Sovereignty and Boundaries of Peru, Mr. Librado Augusto Orozco from the government of Peru.
Good afternoon, and at the outset, let me express my gratitude to organizers of this 10th Our Ocean for the brilliant organization of this conference. And let me just refer to the commitments my country has put forward regarding this conference. As you know, my country is affected by the El Nino. In fact, these words, El Nino, La Niña, were created by the Peruvian fishermen because of the devastating effects for so long in our seas related to the climate change. In this sense, my government is deeply committed to improve technology in order to gauge, to monitor temperature in the sea, and in order to be able to mitigate all these threats in our environment. The first commitment is related to the new technologies for 2 coastal stations, and the second one is related to 2 oceanographic cruises in our sea. Let me just say some words, a little bit of things about both of them. Regarding the use of new technologies to transmit information in the coastal, in our coastal region, we have some stations along the coast of Peru. Unfortunately, this technology is obsolete, but we are deeply committed to improve that. In this sense, we are migrating within these stations from 2G technology to 4G to ensure sustainability of monitoring the Peruvian Sea. This will allow us, our authorities, to be more capable to deal with this task. In addition, we are committed to conducting 2 oceanographic cruises at the sea of the Peruvian Sea. Now, these cruises will allow for in-situ atmospheric monitoring of the Peruvian Sea using hydrographic platforms operated by the Peruvian Navy. The area covered will range from 5 miles offshore to 160 miles offshore, covering 2 seasons, summer and winter. And as I said before, this will enable us to deal with El Niño, especially the climate change related to the change of temperature in our sea. This said, thank you very much indeed for the organization of the brilliant conference.
Thank you very much, Peru. And the next speaker is Mr. Nam Jae-hyun, Director General for Ports and Harbor Bureau of the Republic of Korea.
Good afternoon. My name is Jae-hyun Nam, Director General of Port and Harbors Bureau at the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries, MOF, of Republic of Korea. As the official in the charge of the port policy in Korea, I'm pleased to present our action-oriented voluntary commitment with a particular focus on the shipping and port sectors. Our first voluntary commitment is to enhance green shipping corridors and to expand eco-friendly bunkering infrastructures. Considering evolving international conditions, including IMO regulations and introduction of carbon taxation, or restructuring of industrial and logistics landscape around the green shipping corridor is inevitable. In order to play an active role in establishing stable and sustainable green shipping, Korea plans to build solid foundation for the supply of carbon-neutral fuels. Currently, 78% of new ships ordered in Korea use eco-friendly fuels such as methanol and ammonia. We are expanding and facilitating alternative fuel bunkering infrastructures at the key gateway ports such as Busan Port, Ulsan Port, and Gwangyang Port. In addition, we will introduce green fuel value chains within the port areas and develop them into integrated clusters. Our second voluntary commitment is to attain zero carbon emissions from the port operation by 2050. In 2024, total carbon emissions from ports in Korea amounted to approximately 2.2 million tons. Without significant mitigation efforts, emissions will increase to 3.7 million tons by 2050. To achieve the goal of the carbon net zero port by 2050, Korea is undertaking the following actions. First, we will convert energy source of port cargo handling equipment from diesel power to electricity and hydrogen fuel cell. Second, we will expand the use of alternative maritime power system for ships. The third, we will implement renewable energy systems such as offshore wind power and hydrogen integration connecting to port area. These initiatives will enhance port energy alternative and accelerate the energy shift of port-related logistics as well. To assess and monitor the greenhouse gas emissions efforts, we aim to establish a data-driven carbon inventory system specialized for port logistics. The Republic of Korea reaffirms its voluntary commitment to execute responsible role in the international community, grounded in practical commitments to advance green shipping corridor and carbon neutral port. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Korea, for sharing very ambitious commitment. The next speaker is Sandra Killoy, Senior Director of Environment and Sustainability from the Port of Seattle.
Hello, thank you. Port authorities play a critical role in decarbonizing the maritime industry, and through strong collaboration and investments in research, policies, technology, and infrastructure, ports can send clear market signals. The Port of Seattle in the U.S. has set high ambitions for decarbonization, and as just one port in a vast global network, our aim is to influence this global transition by demonstrating what can be done locally. The Port of Seattle is making 3 commitments today. First, 100% shore power. As the largest cruise home port in the United States West Coast, the Port of Seattle is investing in shore power at all of our terminals. We commit to requiring 100% of cruise ships to be equipped and plug into shore power by the year 2027. And we will implement the additional infrastructure investments that are needed for this to be successful. And not only will this reduce carbon emissions, but it provides cleaner, healthier air for our near-port communities now. Our second commitment is the advancement and development of use of sustainable maritime fuels. By 2028, the port, in collaboration with our industry partners, will analyze the transport, storage, and bunkering of green methanol, and we're doing this as part of our cruise-focused green shipping corridor. We will also complete a harbor vessel modernization study, evaluate joint fuel supply strategies, and develop a sustainable maritime fuels transition roadmap. And then our third commitment is our blue carbon research, which is part of our nature-based solutions. The port will conduct a 5-year study of our blue carbon project site. This research will inform local marine ecosystem restoration efforts in light of ocean acidification, and it will contribute to the scientific body of work on carbon sequestration of kelp, eelgrass, and the associated sediments. So thank you to the Republic of Korea for hosting our oceans. The Port of Seattle is pleased to be part of this event, to be a catalyst for change, and to play an active role in the transition to zero. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing very front-running commitment from the Port of Seattle. The next speaker is Dr. Austin Shelton, Director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability and Sea Grant.
Hafaday and warm greetings, delegates, esteemed colleagues, and ocean champions. I'm Austin Shelton, Director of the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability, Sea Grant, and Guam Green Growth. As a founding island member and steering committee member, I am honored to represent the Local 2030 Islands Network, a global platform advancing island-led, culturally informed, sustainable development solutions. I'm also honored to be on the same stage as Secretary John Kerry, who has chaired a number of our past meetings along with island heads of state. Today I am proud to announce our new commitment, Green Growth for Resilient Islands. The Local 2030 Islands Network commits to launching the Green Growth Partnership community of practice, which will bring together a diverse community of island stakeholders to collaborate on initiatives that promote sustainable development, economic resilience, and environmental conservation using locally led approaches and culturally based solutions. Building on the network's communities of practice and informed by leading examples like the SDG dashboards created by Hawaii, Guam, and Ireland, we will expand peer learning, increase in-country technical capacity, foster collaboration within and across islands for action and implementation, and share best practices for holistic ridge-to-reef management rooted in principles of circularity, localization, and regeneration. The launch of Green Growth Partnership's Community of Practice, shared via the network's virtual island platform, is a free and open resource to all members of the network and will create new opportunities for members and partners to connect across fields, identify and measure sustainable development goal outcomes, and foster scalable solutions to critical island and ocean challenges. Through curriculum co-development, training programs, and the continued growth of SDG dashboards, we aim to support transparent tracking of commitments, including those made here at OurOceanConference, and drive progress toward national and global sustainability and climate resilience goals. Together, through a commitment to green growth and collective action, we can lead the way toward regenerative and a resilient future. Sejus Maasi, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, I would like to invite Monsieur Pierre Bardou, Director, Global Fund for Coral Reefs from United Nations Capital Development Fund. Actually, this presentation is very special because this is a showcase commitment. Showcase commitment refers to a previously announced commitment that has been successfully implemented. This 10th Our Ocean Conference celebrates this wonderful achievement. So, Mr. Bardou, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon and greetings to all participants. Firstly, let me highlight that this conference is taking place under the shadow of the worst global coral reef bleaching event in our history, with 84% of reef affected. Spearheading efforts with a blended finance approach, the Global Fund for Coral Reef is responding with a focus on protecting Earth's most resilient reefs, the climate refugia. We have now reached the midpoint in our 10 years GFCR demonstration phase, and I'm here to report that we have succeeded in supporting more than 100 businesses and financing facilities in 21 countries to address key drivers of degradation and unlock new private investments in conservation. GFCR is having positive impact on more than 5% of Earth coral reefs, as well as over 10 million hectares of MPAs. While the GFCR is beginning to demonstrate proof of concept, we must do far more. We need to deliver greater action to catalyze new sources of ocean finance and the transformation to a sustainable ocean economy that we are all working towards. Here in Busan and through wider sessions, United Nations agencies have been convening strategic dialogues with states and stakeholders, including WRI, IUCN, and many others in the room today. This effort focuses on developing new streams of finance for win-win solutions, benefiting the oceans, states, communities, and sustainable economy. Out of this imperative, the One Ocean Finance Facility idea is emerging. Still in its formative stage, the bold proposition has the potential to serve as a fit-for-purpose mechanism to mobilize and pool new, previously untapped private sector resources at scale. This initial consultation has surfaced broad willingness to engage in the co-design and conceptualization of this idea on the road to the 4th UN Ocean Conference here in Korea in 2028. Today, I invite all interested parties, states and actors to take part in this dialogue process, And please join us in shaping a transformative financial architecture for a sustainable blue future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, the great achievement you have made. Ladies and gentlemen, and dear panelists and presenters, now I have to bring this session to the end. I do appreciate your sharing of inspiring thoughts, and we believe that we had very good discussion, and this discussion is going to be the stepping stone and building stone for further action in the area of climate and ocean nexus. So thank you very much, and I hope all of you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Please give a big hand to our moderator and speakers for sharing your excellent knowledge and in-depth information with us. Thank you once again. And thank you to all of you for participating in the climate change plenary session. There's one housekeeping note that I would like to deliver. The networking dinner for Our Oceans, hosted by the Busan Metropolitan City, will be taking place at 6:30 p.m. in the Grand Ballroom of Paradise Hotel. It is attendance is upon invitation only, so please keep that in mind. And thank you so much for staying with us till the end, and we wish you a pleasant evening. Thank you.